First off, I appreciate you having me here this morning, and for those of you from outside of Owen Sound, anybody from outside of Owen Sound? First of all, I'm not the mayor, but on behalf of Owen Sound, thank you for coming. I find I spend a lot of time traveling. For example, the last 2 weeks I've been in Calgary, New York, Peterborough, Kitchener, London, Toronto, and somewhere in there I slept. But I call Owen Sound home because it really is a beautiful community. It's unfortunate we have a little bit of an overcast day, but once again, just on behalf of the non-parliamentary people in Owen Sound, I just want to thank you and hope you enjoy your time here. So with that said, I was trying to think of how to really start our conversation today. And what I was thinking of is I'd just share a situation. Oh, now I've lost there, I'm back. I'd share a situation with you that happened to me a number of years ago. I had an intern job selling cars. So what happened to me when I moved back to the area, there wasn't a lot of employment. So I decided I had to do something. So I decided to sell cars. And I was actually pretty good at it. I started out in early in the year, in the springtime, when it's typically busy, and picked up the trade, if you will, pretty quickly. And so what happened was a young lady had come in to see me and had looked at a specific car, a specific model of car, and then she disappeared, went back. She actually lived in, I think, in Kitchener it was. And she came back a few weeks later and said, Shawn, I went out locally where she was in Kitchener. I looked at the same kind of car. I got a price. Here's the price sheet. Here's the price I got on the car. And, if you can come somewhere close to that price, I'll buy from you. Because although I don't live here, I'm from here. I appreciate you. I trust you. And I said, okay, sounds good. So I went in to see the sales manager. If you know anything about sales, that's the person that, approves the sale. And we talked about it. We come up with a price that pretty much met what she brought forward. And so I felt good. I had gone to my boss, right, the sales manager. He felt good about it. And I went out and generally sold her the car. So she comes in, we're going through the paperwork, and at that point I had to go in and see the owner of the business to get his blessing just as the final signature. And as I walked in, I'll never forget, the sales manager was standing behind the business owner in this big chair. And I walked in, I'm like, well, that's kind of strange, but okay, whatever. And I walked in, and the owner looked at me, and we had a pretty good relationship thus far, and he says, Shawn, what did you just do? And I'm thinking, okay, it's Saturday, we're here to sell cars. I sold a car. Nobody else that day had actually sold a car, first car of the day. And I said, I sold a car, right? Making you money, I sold a car. And he said, well, did you ever think about the fact that you're price matching? She's brought you a quote from out of town where they sell more volume. So they make a little more money that way, more so than we do. And I said, well, no, I didn't think about that. He said, well, did you ever think her quote was for a bright orange model, whereas the one you're selling her is blue? Which of those colors do you think is more common? I said, well, probably the blue. And he said, so do you think it's possible that what actually happened was they lowballed the price because they wanted to dump the orange car, and you've met that by giving her the same price in the blue car? So logically, I looked at the sales manager, and I said, right? And the sales manager did this. Now I'm not going to tell you the thought that went through my mind at that point. I had have you ever felt like you've been sold up the river? So I said to the owner, I said, okay, now I'm going to suggest to you, as most of you, right? I've worked hard thus far in my life. I don't plan on stopping. I've got my, growing up in a small town, my parents bred into me morals, respect for authority, all these kinds of things. So I felt bad. I felt frustrated, but I felt bad. So I went back to see the young lady, and I said, look, we have a problem. And I tried to explain her the situation. We found a way to kind of work together. I was able to sell her the car for more money, but I gave her some options, so it all worked out for the best. She was happy. I was happy. I hadn't seen the owner the rest of the day until it was time to leave. I'm heading out the door. The owner comes up behind me, puts his arm around me and says, "Atta go, buddy. I knew you could do it." And I thought, who is this person? A couple hours ago, if he had a gun, I don't know if I'd be here. Now he's my buddy. Now, I'm not sharing this story at this point. It's not about the owner. It's not about this scenario specifically. But here's what happened. I go home, 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. I get home. My dad's there. I'm crusty. Pour myself a drink. My dad says, "What's going on? Have a good day at work? Did you sell a car?" And I said, yeah, I sold a car, okay. He says, oh, you don't seem very happy about it. And I said, no, that's a good way to put it, not happy. And he said, well, what happened? So I explained the situation to him, told him what happened. And he says, well, Shawn, let me ask you a couple questions. Did the owner, when you had this situation, do you think he's going to pay you for the car that you sold? Are you going to get commission for what you sold? And I said, yeah, of course he's going to pay me commission. And he said, okay. And are you able to go back into work Monday? I mean, have you been suspended or is there something wrong? And I said, no, when I left, he was quite pleased. Big arm around my shoulder. And he said, okay, so you're going to get paid for the car. You've still got a job to go back to. What's the problem? And I said, what's the problem? I'm going to suggest to you that in that discussion that I had with the owner, his voice was quite raised. Yelling, in fact. If anybody ever worked around or in the car industry, unfortunately, yelling is kind of the modus operandi that's been around for some time. If you ever get behind the scenes, it's not that fun necessarily. And I said, what do you mean? I'm not going to work for somebody that yells at me. I won't do it. And it was at that very time I decided I'm getting another job. And within a month, I had another job. And when the owner said to me, I'm sorry to see you go. Why did you get this other job? I said, I'm just looking for a change, right? Looking for a change. You miserable... No, I won't say what I said. Anyways. So with that said, I share that story for one specific reason, okay? It's this. It's that the difference between my father's perspective on that situation and my perspective is a generational difference. It's a difference because of how we grew up, what we're used to in the working environment, and what we're willing to tolerate. And I think if you've got children or maybe even grandchildren today that you put in that situation, they might react even worse. Somebody raises their voice, I think you would agree with me, if that person was maybe early 20s today, they'd leave right then and there. They wouldn't finish the sale. They wouldn't go back on Monday. They'd be gone because you don't treat them that way. Now, the question that I really want us to discuss today is, who's right and who's wrong? Anybody have an answer? I don't either. That's the problem, right? I'm sorry to let you down. So one thing I wanted to go through here today, we'll see if my clicker is working. It's not working. Can you undarken my screen? Thank you very much. I just said to him before when he made the screen black, I'm like, how do I get it undarked? I don't know how to do that. Here we go. So, thank you very much. So what I wanted to do today was share with you some ideas and insights that I've come across in my travels. I do kind of a lot of informal research. So I do a lot of work with business owners and executives around how to get more from their people. In the form of, in some cases, team building events, but not the rah, let's go bowling team building events, but more, what's a challenge in the business? Let's get a group of employees together that know the business and brainstorm ideas and put solutions into place to fix them. But I also do a lot of work with millennials, younger folks. Just about a month ago, for example, I did a little workshop with anybody an accountant in the room, or has been an accountant, or fine? Okay, good, I can make fun of them. No, I'm just kidding. You are? Okay. So CPA. Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. They have ambassadors that are in schools, right, in university and college that go around and promote the brand. And I do a lot of workshops for them with those folks. So I get a chance for live surveys, to ask questions of them, to get their feedback and understand their perspective. So what I'm going to share with you today, some of which is based on research, but some of which is just based on the experience and the feedback I've been given. Okay, so I just want to kind of counter our conversation today for that. So with that said, here's a few distinctions I wanted to share with you this morning when you think about the younger generation. So what I'm going to talk about specifically, initially at least, is millennials. So what are some distinctions around millennials? So here are some things. By 2020, first off, millennials, okay, and I'll give you the dates here in a minute, are going to be 40% of the North American workforce. As of today, the millennial generation born between 1980 and 2000, okay, are the predominant generation in the workforce. They have surpassed the baby boomers. Okay, so that means a couple things to us, and here's one important thing. The baby boomer generation, born between 1946 and 64, generally, give or take a year, right, depending on which research you read. Generation X, born between 65 and 1980, and millennials, or Gen Y, same thing, right, born between 1980 and 2000. Now, if you happen to be Gen X, there's some bad news. You have been, throughout your entire life, the minority when it comes to generations, which means in the working environment, you've typically had to or been forced to follow through with what baby boomers wanted because there's just more of them. You're going to continue to be the minority because the millennials now outpace or outnumber Generation X and the baby boomers. So I share that with you. The other reason I wanted to share with you is this, that for what I'm going to share today, my intention is just to get you thinking differently. Whether you're in business, even relative to the Rotary, how do we attract more folks who are younger? How do we get them to stick around? And what I want to suggest to you is we really have to start thinking differently about the organization, the groups, the structures, the focus, and that is very uncomfortable for most of us. And so if this makes you uncomfortable, or if you disagree with what I'm saying, that's okay. My intention is really just to get you thinking a little bit differently. And if you walk away today with some new ideas, then I think we've achieved what I'd like to achieve. So here are some distinctions. Millennials themselves, that younger generation that are out there today, whether they're in the workforce, maybe looking at being part of the Rotary, 72% want to be their own boss. 72%. Now, you say, what does that mean exactly? How might we witness that? Well, here's some examples. I was speaking at a conference about a year ago, and a young lady who had brought me in was sitting next to me, about 24 years old. And as I'm getting ready to speak, I'm asking her questions. How's the audience? Right? What's the day been like? Is everybody in a good mood? What are some things I should avoid? Right? Here's what she's saying to me in return. Who built your website? When did you start your business? How many clients do you have? And I'm thinking, these are really odd questions based on the fact that I'm about to speak to this large group. So I finally asked her, why are you asking me these questions about my business? I don't get it. And she said, oh, because this job I have, that's just my day job. I sell isogenics on the side, which is a health food marketing pyramid kind of thing. And I'm a graphic artist. I build websites. I'm like, wow, so she's got 3 things going on. And I said, how can you sustain those 3 things? And she said, well, 21 bucks an hour in this job, I mean, that doesn't even pay my school loan. If I want to have some money, I got to make it somewhere. So there's a variety of reasons why millennials want to be their own boss, but more than ever before, we've got people out there with an entrepreneurial mindset and a desire, which means put them in a job they don't like, they're just going to go back to their parents' basement and create the next app that'll make them $5 million, right? Or at least that's what they think because they see and hear about it every day, right? If they have to work, let me say that again. If they have to work, 79% want to coach or mentor. 79% want to coach or mentor. Now, what is the difference? Anybody tell me, what's the difference between a coach and mentor? If you take a look at those two versus a boss, so just contrast the two, coach, mentor versus a boss. What do you think the differences are? A coach guides, a boss tells, right? Sit down, stand up, it's break time, have that assignment to me by Friday. A coach, hey, what time's convenient for you to take a break? I mean, I know you've been working a lot this morning, you seem to be really focused, right? Friday, we need to try and have this assignment wrapped up. What can I do to help you get there? Should we bring the team together and talk about it? 2 very different approaches. Now, who's had a boss in their career at some point? All right. Who here's been a boss at some point? Yeah. I remember the first time, throughout my career, starting at 23, I started leading people. And when I was about 27, 28, I got a job with a company where I had my first office with my name on the door. And I remember it was in Milton. And so my parents have always lived in Owen Sound. So I remember I'm looking at my name and I'm like, man, if my mom was here, right? This is so great. And so I thought, now I'm doing it. I'm going to go start telling more people what to do, right? I have an office with a name on the door. And funny thing, the more I told people what to do, the less they listened to what I had to say. I want to suggest to you that as individuals who our education and knowledge and experience has been growing, right, over the decades, as those people, we've become less tolerant with others telling us what to do. We want to contribute as individuals, but millennials, that's all they know. They know nothing else, right? So 79% want a coach or mentor, not a boss. 88% prefer a collaborative work culture over a competitive one. Let's all work together. There was a gentleman that owns a large organization in Windsor. I went to see him and we were talking about getting people to work together in a different way, and he says, I have something to show you. He took me to an upper level that they just renovated, and multiple different roles, engineering, supply chain, sales, marketing, all sitting in one big open area. No cubicles, just all desks. And around the perimeter were offices, but they're meeting rooms technically, but they're like a small meeting room with glass and no door. And I said, so what are those around them out for? He said, well, if there's a meeting that you have to have, or you need to take a call, or you need to have a little bit of privacy, you can go and use that room, but it's all glass, you can see right through it, there's no door. And I said, so nobody gets privacy? He says, well, why does somebody need privacy? And I said, okay, fair enough. I said, where did you get this idea? He said, well, from the employees. And he has a large staff of young engineers. I would say it's about 80% of his business are engineers and all very young. And he said, we had to make these changes because to come in and say, sit here, good luck, you're going to be an engineer the next 25 years of your life. There's your boss, Shawn. He's 50. He'll probably be here till he's 75. Have a good time. Right? They're not sticking around for that. They want something new. They want something different. They're looking, it's like the attention span thing that I'll talk about shortly. So let me come back to that point in a minute. Yeah, I got something for you. Just wait. So 74% want flexible work schedules. Right? Hey, last night I was on the phone at 6 o'clock, so I took a half hour off this morning, showed up a half hour later. Right? That should be cool. Most bosses, we start at 8. You're expected to be here at 8. Now, you have to ask yourself, and I presented this question the other day, why is that we have to start at 8? I mean, every business is different. But if you start to think about some of these structures we have in place, why is there that start time? Something I did with a team I had once, I had some people that wanted to come in early, and I had some people that were always late. And so I said to them, okay, how do we fix this? Could we do some staggered shifts maybe? Those who want to start at 7, finish at 3. Those who want to start at 8, start at 8, finish at 4. Those who want to start at 9, finish at 5. And then when they all said, that's great, Shawn, this is fantastic, I took that to my customer who wanted more time we had like a counter, a servicing counter for customers, and we're typically only open from 7 till 3 every day. I said, hey, good news. We're now going to be open from 7 till 5. They said, that's great. How did you do that? I'm like, well, it's difficult, right? But how did I ever get to that conclusion? I just asked the question, right? If you're leading folks today, again, whether it be in an organization like the Rotary or whether it be out in business, we have to start to ask more questions and listen to the response. It really is as simple as that. And 88% want work-life integration. They're okay with being on their phone in the evening or on the weekend, but again, that should mean that on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, if they want to get onto Facebook and talk to their friend, you should be fine with that. So very different philosophy versus I remember times where it was like no personal calls while you're at work, right? I know organizations today where even small businesses where they're struggling with keeping people off their phones. And I say, well, maybe they'll stay off the phone if you give them times to be on the phone. Maybe you say, look, at break time, we're going to put Wi-Fi in this room, and we're going to add 5 minutes to break so you can do whatever you got to do on the phone. All we ask for safety reasons, maybe, is that you're not on your phone between the hours. If you approach that way, potentially it's a solution. Obviously, the best solution is to ask the employees. Here's my concerns, what are yours, and what's the best approach here? So here's some things to think about. If we look at the distinctions in each generation, okay, so I just pulled random distinctions here as far as what each generation generally wants relative to their working environment. Baby boomers still want stability and predictability. I want to know that that company and that job is going to be there as long as I want it to be there, so that I can retire, I can collect pension. My dad tells me about his pension. I don't know what that is. I always tell my parents, I'm on the Freedom 82 plan, and my average life expectancy is 78 and a half. So go figure that out. Baby boomers want long-term stability, financial security, and loyalty and respect. So those are just a few things I've plucked out of some research as, again, generally what is the baby boomer generation looking for in an organization, whether it be the Rotary, whether it be work, doesn't really matter. These are the things they're looking for. Now, what did Gen X want? Well, they want opportunity and growth. They want a chance to move around. They want more education. They want more knowledge. They want to be involved. They're not necessarily going to sit back and listen. They want to be part of what's happening. They want career progression and development opportunities, but they're not necessarily good delegators. They want to be able to do things on their own, generally speaking, okay? Now, let's look at the big contrast here. Millennials, what do they want? They want meaningful parallel careers. Well, think about the example I shared earlier with the young lady with 3 things going on. I think you're going to find that's quite the norm for people in their early 20s. They don't just have a job and then they veg out in the evening. They've got multiple things going on, right? Instant feedback and autonomy. How am I doing? How about now? What about now? How about now? Right? I just want to check, is everything going okay for you guys? They want job variety and creativity. And let me share an example of this. So I have a client in New York who is struggling. They're in the fashion industry, and so I've got designers, I've got sewers, right? They've got these very structured areas, and they were having a hard time keeping young folks in that realm. And I said, well, just because I'm in production, why does that mean I can't become a purchaser of material? And why does that mean I can't become a designer's assistant? And if you start to create some variety, which is what millennials want, now they're not looking at a company saying, okay, they're going to hire me. The designers there have all been there 10 years. Does that mean I'm going to be there for 10 years? No, I don't want that job. But if you say, hey, hold on a second, I can move from this to this to this, and I get a choice here, okay, that's something I might be interested in because that's variety, and that's what millennials want. And lastly, they're multitasking and tech savvy. There was a study done recently about multitasking. Anybody here a multitasker? Here's what the study found, and you've probably heard of this before. Multitasking does not exist. The human brain cannot do two things at once. What it can do very efficiently is switch between tasks very quickly. I can't even tell you how quickly it's so fast. So what happens is if we're trying to be productive and we're multitasking, a lot of times we're actually not as productive as we think. But if there's one generation that has grown up with multiple distractions, multiple things going on, and they've got the switch nailed down to the fastest time possible, right, it's the millennial generation. So that's the good news, okay? But when you look at those distinctions, I want to suggest to you that the left one and the middle one, if you think about the structure, again, of our organizations, our associations, our businesses, generally support the needs of the first two today, not so much on the right. And if the predominant generation in the workforce today and continuing to grow is on the right, we have some problems. Either A, they're not going to join our organization, or B, they're going to join it, outnumber us, beat us up, and change everything. Okay? So our decision we have to make is how open and receptive are we to what they want to do? How open and receptive do we want to engage with them about their needs, what they'd like to see changed, and then see what will happen from that. It really is all about engaging them, having conversation, asking questions, and seeing what their response is. So with that, what are some things specifically that generation is concerned about? I wanted to share this to give everybody here some things to think about moving forward. Well, 56% are going to leave their employees if their values don't align. Right? And so more than ever before, when my dad got a job, he looked for a job. Right? Because he had to pay the bank back for the money he borrowed to get his house and his car and his furniture. When I looked for a job, I looked for a job that paid me enough money to support somewhat of a lifestyle I was looking for. When a millennial looks for a job, they say, what does that company stand for? Is there anything I find about that company that is not appropriate? Chevron is having a difficult time attracting millennials, right? Because, and I'm not beating up Chevron, but generally what an oil company stands for is a little more difficult today to attract people than what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think you're going to find it's going to become more difficult. If you see a lot of these large organizations today, they're doing a lot of branding, right? They're advertising and promoting themselves because they're trying to appeal in a different fashion, right, to the younger generation. It used to be they would just say, we're hiring, and people would line up. Now they say, we stand for this, we do that, you should come work for us. I saw this thing on the back of a card on LinkedIn the other day that somebody shared, and I think it's Apple is doing this. It's a card that I think they're having employees hand out, and it says, you are fantastic, we should talk. And they're using it as a way to try and appeal to millennials. And here's the cool thing. It's not just on the card. It's the graphics are kind of neat. It's done in a way that kind of stands out so it catches your attention, right? So they're trying to do things to draw in millennials because, again, they want very different things than previous generations. 28% are not satisfied with the work-life balance at work, going back to my earlier point. So if they're not satisfied, what does that mean? They're not going to stick around. One of the conversations we had, and I think if I can call the Rotary an organization, is that a fair statement? I think one of the challenges any organization faces today is attracting millennials to take their spare time and come and join the organization, regardless of what it stands for. I mean, the Rotary, if anybody has great values, it's the Rotary. But how do I get the attention of the millennials? How do I keep that attention? And how do I get them to commit their personal time? Because as individuals, we've become, especially younger generations, very focused on our personal time, how important it is to us, because we can do things with it, right? 63% believe their skills are being overlooked. I have an MBA. You want me to start as an accounting coordinator? No, because I have an MBA. Because I've spent $80,000 getting an education that my parents told me I need to get and my teachers told me I need to get, and you want me to start there making 21 bucks an hour? I might as well stay in my parents' basement. The government will extend the loan, and I'll work at McDonald's and try and build that next app and make $5 million, right? That's the mindset, again, generally speaking, that we're facing. All right? 52% seek employers who offer rapid career progression. Anybody ever heard of Pepsi? If you drink rye, you've heard of Pepsi. Right? Now, if we're in the U.S. right now, I'd say if you drink whiskey, right? PepsiCo had a problem attracting people, younger folks, to work in their operations, which is on the floor, bottling and packaging, right? Because this doesn't sound sexy. They could attract people all day long for IT and marketing and sales, but not in the operation. So Pepsi in Cambridge has changed their structure that if you apply for sales, IT, marketing, you start 18 to 24 months in operations as a team leader to 30-year unionized employees. If you survive, then you get the choice to move into the area you originally wanted to, or maybe another area. That's been going on for almost 5 years, and it's been highly successful, right? So what happens, you apply. Now you wonder, why is that? Why could they not attract somebody to an operations role before, but now they can? Well, one thing, a millennial sees the opportunity to move around. Hey, I can work in operations. There's a set time limit, 18 months. That seems like I can survive that. And then I'm going to move into something else, and it can be my choice. Wow, what a lot of freedom for me, right? And also thinking about what they've done is they've said you start as a team leader, not just as an employee on the floor. So they're appealing to that desire to have that leadership and that title. But they're not paying them anything more than they would. And they're getting a couple benefits. They're having people now move into other roles that understand how the business works, because we all know operations is the core of any business, right? So they have people moving into other departments, making great decisions because they understand how the business works. But also what they're finding is some people are deciding to stay in operations. They enjoy the fast pace, the change, right? So there's a lot of benefits coming from that, and it's been ongoing now almost 5 years, and they've had great success. Last but not least, 44% plan to leave their current employer in the next 2 years. Now you ask, why is that? Well, everything we've talked about so far, right? Did somebody put that slide in there? One thing I just wanted to mention, we talked earlier about attention span. We all kind of chuckled about that, right? I'm not going to put this solely on millennials. I think all of us have some issues here. Microsoft, back in, I'm going to say it was 2002, 2004 range, did a study, and you can look this up. Look up, Google, because that is the encyclopedia of today. By the way, if it's on Google, it's got to be true, right? That's what the young folks will tell you anyways, right? So Microsoft did a study in the early 2000s to study attention span. And what I mean by attention span is 100% attention span. So for example, if I yelled fire, I would have everybody's attention here for a series of seconds, at which point some would still be paying attention, some would be jumping through the window, right? Somebody running out the door screaming. So how long can we sustain 100% of our attention, which we all know it's not long, right? So back in the early 2000s, they did a study, North Americans, and it was 12 seconds. 12 seconds on average, the attention span of 100% attention span that we have. Now, they did the study again in 2014, North Americans. The attention span, anybody guess? 8 seconds. Now you think, okay, it's dropped 4, and why is Microsoft doing this study? Well, they're trying to figure out what's the influence of technology. By the way, I haven't checked my phone for 30 minutes. I'm kind of losing my mind here. Can somebody check my phone for me? But here's the neat thing. So our 100% of our attention span, 8 seconds. You know what the attention span of a goldfish is? 9. So, something to feel good about today. We now have an average attention span that is less than that of a goldfish. As I said, if you want to look up, there's a lot of good information. Just Google. It's actually called the Goldfish Attention Span Study. Like you'll find all sorts of information about it. So attention span is another issue. Again, if you want to attract or appeal to a younger generation, I'm sure personally from personal experiences, their attention span is very different. I was taught growing up to be respectful. So if somebody's speaking to me, I look them in the eye. I pay attention. I listen. Even if I don't want to listen, I listen, right? But younger folks today have grown up with technology that's constantly popping in their face, right? Push notifications, messages, likes, all of these things happening. And so what happens to them? They can't pay attention. And I think as parents, myself included, we don't worry so much about, focus on, paying attention when I talk to you, right? Because think about the dinner table today with my kids, right? I'm saying, pay attention to what I have to say. Hold on a second, I'm almost done this email, right? Anyways, right? So what example am I setting? So this attention span issue, it's for all of us to worry about, but millennials, it's ingrained in them. It is who they are. I think most of us who actually lived without a phone, without a computer, I mean, it's crazy. People used to talk to one another. Isn't that ludicrous, right? Was there life before email? Right? My dad is 74, I think, 73. He's joke of the day every day. Here's a joke, something to laugh about, right? That's his activity on email. But he's on that email every day because he's grown up with it. But if he had to stop it, he could stop it because he knows life without it. Millennials, they don't know life without it. You take a millennial and try and take their phone, you are in for a battle. And it's going to change, right? Gen Z is what they're calling the next generation, right? My children, it's even worse. I mean, it's normal that a kid today at 9 years age, 10 years of age, will get a phone. And I'll be honest with you, if my kids reach that age and their friends have phones, I'll get them a phone too, because you have to balance off. I don't want them to stand out to be some whack job that doesn't have what everybody else has, but I also know it has an impact on who they are. And parents who are becoming distracted on raising our children, I mean, my opinion, I don't know about you, because we're using technology, means we're not paying as much attention to our kids. Unfortunately, I know a few parents that to keep the kid entertained, they say, here, take the iPad, go use that. That's how they manage their kids. And it's not for me to speak up. I mean, my wife and I go home and talk about it when we do experience this. We see it in restaurants. I want to suggest, I'm sure we have done it, but I don't think it's a norm for us. We're trying to be very conscious of that impact. And it's finding a balance, but I want to suggest as people being distracted, we're not paying enough attention to our kids. And the question we have to ask yourself is, what are those folks going to be like 20 years down the road? What's their attention span going to be like? I don't think it's going to be good. I think the next time they do the study, it's going to get worse. So a few ideas to share with you kind of on this has all been negative, you're all depressed now, and I think, wow, this Shawn guy, that's great. Thanks for coming, right? Where's the bar? But I want to share with you some things that you can do, that some of my clients are doing, that organizations are doing. I've shared the Pepsi example, but how can we get over this? I think before I even get into that, the first thing I'll say is that what you want to do is make sure that we're open-minded. I did a talk like this last year to a group of presidents of distributors in the U.S. And at the end, a gentleman came up to me, probably mid-late 50s, and he said, Shawn, isn't all this stuff crap, right? I mean, when I was working, I did what my boss said. I listened to what he had to say. I paid attention to him. Now you're over there telling us we got to change. Shouldn't they change for us? And I said, it's an interesting take on it. And I actually hear that a lot. I say, give me your number. I'd like to check in with you in 5 years and see what your ideas are now. Because I think those folks that are closed-minded completely are going to have the greatest challenge. I'm not saying you got to change everything, but we got to be more open-minded. Because when I tell you these things, rarely have I said something I'm sure that you said, no, that's not the case. Most of you say, oh yeah, I've seen that in my kids, my grandkids, people out in the street, right? So if we know that's the case, how are we going to change the environment to appeal to these people? So some things to think about. Facilitative leaders who are inclusive and empowering. I think at the end of this, if you want, and I'll be corrected here very quickly if I'm wrong, there are copies of my book out on the table. You can come get one. I'll even sign it for you. Not that that makes any difference at all, but you don't have to have me sign it if you don't want. But you're welcome to that. And in there I talk about facilitative leadership, which is I think we still need leaders, but we need to go from being that prescriptive, directive boss, you do this, now do that, I'm going to give you what I think you need and that's it, to the more, hey, how can I help? What do we need to do now? How can I help the team? How can I support you? Are there things that I can go fix to make things work better for you guys? And that's a different approach, especially when you get older, because it's not what you're accustomed to. So I think we still need leaders, but we need to change our approach to leadership. Being a mentor versus a boss. We talked about what mentorship is and how it's different, right? Increasing levels of autonomy for employees. How do we allow our employees the opportunity to make more decisions on their own? Right? How do we offer people that we might be wanting to bring into the Rotary and options? Right? If we say, for example, you can join the Rotary, here's what it looks like, there's weekly meetings, it's these times and these locations, and it's very structured, I think you're going to find you're going to have a hard time attracting a millennial who will say, well, look, why can't we have an online community? Why can't I go on there anytime I want? Why is this so structured? Because they're not used to structure and they're not comfortable with structure. Okay? Again, you can disagree with me. That's okay. Send all complaints. No, I'm just kidding. How can we give them the opportunity to make decisions where it's not detrimental, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. Dynamic roles and responsibilities. If we want to bring in and attract more younger folks today, we can't just say, hey, you're in here, or you're in there, or you're now in this role. We have to be able to say, hey, come on in because there's all this opportunity to do these different things and move around. That's what draws them in. That's what they find exciting. So we have to promote our organizations, our businesses in that manner. Selective hiring that focuses more on team fit than skill. Anybody here found in the past that your boss, your leader, your manager, maybe even yourself, were promoted because of your skill set? Anybody ever had that? Right? Most of us. Hey, you're good at that job, and now you're going to be the manager of people. And then you start saying, why isn't everybody doing it exactly like I did it? Because I was doing it right, they're all doing it wrong, right? The whole idea that today, if you really want to build a strong team, you really have to think about, it's more important about team fit than skill. I can train anybody on virtually anything. It'll take time. It'll take experience. But I can train them on skill. I can't train them on fit within my organization, my team, my business, right? I can't train that. If it's just not a good fit, it's not a good fit. So we have to stop thinking about qualifications on the resume and start thinking about how can we bring them in and have people in the team interview them and see what people in the team think about these folks. Will they fit in our team? To me, that's becoming more and more important. Redesign compensation, supporting role progression. I tell a lot of my clients, you don't need to give them more money than you would have in the past, but maybe you need to give them raises, smaller raises, more frequently. The whole idea of annual reviews, from a millennial, that's ridiculous. They want to know daily and get a raise monthly, right? But it doesn't mean if you were going to give them, and I'll make it simple, if you're going to give them $5 or $2 that year if they did well, why can't you give them 50 cents a quarter? There's 75 cents a quarter. That at least provides them a little more visibility and to them a little more opportunity, right? It's a little more enticing to stick around for that. Rethink how we communicate with employees. So if you're anybody, employees or otherwise, think about, anybody here text? Show of hands. Okay, so that's good. I find some people are very open to texting, some people are very closed to it. But I think what we need to do if we want to engage younger generations is meet them on the communication stream that they're most comfortable with. Okay, whether that's texting, email. I'll tell you a couple months ago when I did this CPA workshop, or I guess just over a month ago, one of the things that happened was they were asking me about how to get a job. How do I get a job? Shawn, I've sent my resume through email 16 times, and nobody's reading it. And they're all sharing these, and they're like, yeah, email. Nobody's answering the emails anymore. And I said, well, how many emails do you think the executive of whatever PepsiCo gets? Or how many emails do you think that headhunter gets? Well, quite a few. And I said, so what are you doing to set yourself apart? And I don't know, I sent an email. And I said, have you ever, have you ever thought about picking up the phone? Nope, haven't thought. And when I said that, they said, but that's going to interrupt them, right? Like, that's rude. They're not used to picking up the phone at all. So I'm trying to convince 35 people, pick up the phone. Like, you want to stand out, pick up the phone. If they don't answer, that's okay, leave a message. One guy said, I do call, but when the voicemail comes on, I hang up quick. I don't want to leave a message. Email has created this shield by which, we can send stuff and you're not going to worry about me. But I'm trying to convince them there's no personality there. There's no connection. There's no human connection behind an email. There's no human connection behind text. I don't care how many emoticons you put in the smiley faces. It's not the same as that one-on-one interaction. So to me, that's the education for millennials, and I carry that everywhere I go. And it was funny, I'm starting to talk about the phone, and then one guy says, what do I say? So I said, okay, let's role play. I said, you're you, I'm the guy you're calling. Go ahead. He's like, hello? I said, yeah, how can I help you? This is where I'd hang up, Shawn. I don't know what to say, right? So I role play with him. But here's the thing. Those practical experiences, they're not getting that in school. They're getting knowledge and information. I mean, how many of you went to school and day one of your first job, you thought, well, school didn't help me at all here. Did you ever? I remember sitting in my first job thinking, why did I go to college? Nothing I'm doing is here, right? But they're having the same experience, but unfortunately it's around communications. They're learning all new technology for communications. They're not learning the tried and true. And I think the benefit that all of us have is we're good with most of them. We know the old, we know the benefit, we're learning the new. And if we're open-minded, which we are, we apply the new. They don't have it that way. They're only looking at new. So we have to educate them on the value of the other, right? And an increase in flexibility and support of telecommuting. That's an extreme idea, but I think a lot of businesses today could cut costs by having people work from home. there's been a ton of studies that suggest people are actually more productive. And most people push back on that. They say, well, that's just not possible for my business. And maybe it's not, right? If I'm a contractor, I can't have everybody working at home shoveling in their backyard. That's not going to help me, right? But there are businesses that pay a lot of money for buildings and rent and lease and overhead, and yet, right, they could have people work from home. And there are ways to manage that. There are ways to communicate face-to-face through technology. And there are some companies doing that. My business today is me. We've got my wife 3 minutes up the hill, actually, is where our home is. We have a home office there. She works from home, takes care of the kids, does the books of the business, runs errands, goes to the mailbox, all that kind of stuff. And I've got 3 other people who I've never met face-to-face that help me in different areas of the business. And I'm communicating with them on a daily basis. One girl's in Windsor. Another girl is from Ottawa and right now is in France, travels the world. Right? And I've never seen them face-to-face, but we have a lot of Skype conversations. We send a lot of emails, and it works very well. And I have no concerns about their productivity because I can see the output of it. Businesses need to start to think in that manner. Not every business, but some businesses where it makes sense to do so. The other thing I want to mention here, now how's my time? 5 minutes. You're either waving to me or I got 5 minutes. 5 minutes, all right. The good news is we're 5 minutes away from the end. If this has been painful, 5 minutes left. That's all you got to do. And the bar is just down the hall, right? Motivation is less about money. So some things to think about. Are you being inclusive of people's ideas? I said employees, but younger folks' ideas. Or are you dismissing them? Are you accidentally dismissing their ideas? Somebody says, hey, I got something I'd like to share. And you say, yeah, that's a good idea. Anyways, let's move on. If you do that, especially to younger generation, they will clam up and that is it. They will not contribute again. Right? Think about yourself. Last time you raised your hand and had something to share and people kind of shot you down a little bit, did you share more ideas? Not usually, right? And younger generations, I think you would agree, are more sensitive to that. Is free time for employees offered when they're at work? And I would suggest going back to the example I shared before in the Rotary, right? The structure we have, and I know you've made a lot of changes and done a lot of things to try and be more inclusive, right? But I think we need to do more. And I think the best way to find out how to do more is to talk to younger folks. Say, if you're here, why are you here? What keeps you here? If you're not, come on in, right? But I think you're going to find structure is something that they struggle with. Free time is something they value. Giving up that time, no matter what the cause, is difficult, the younger the generation. What are you doing to create stronger community? You hear a lot of talk about we want to change our culture. Anybody ever heard of that? We want to change our culture, right? I think that's the wrong thing. Changing a culture suggests that you have to conform to the way I want you. I think we need to create communities of like-minded people. Owen Sound, okay? I'm gonna if you're from here, who's from Owen Sound? Anybody from Owen Sound? Okay, I'm just joking, so don't take offense to this. Actually, young, what keeps you here so far in Owen Sound? Why are you here?
That's where my house is.
That's where your house is. And she lives in your house? Okay. Do you have, you don't? Do you have intention to stick around?
Yes.
Okay, why?
I work here.
Okay.
Raising my kids here.
Raising your kids? What about raising your kids makes you want to stay here?
It's a great community.
Yeah.
A lot of activities for them.
Yeah.
Work hours are reasonable.
Yeah. So the key word you mentioned is community. People come to this area, people come to small communities because they like the community. They like what it stands for. They feel like they're part of it. We have to start to think about how do we create a community? How do we create a community in the Rotary? You are a community, but how do we attract different people to that community? It means we have to change what our community stands for, how we act, how we think, and how we evolve. Do you encourage collaboration? Do you encourage people to work together? And are you providing greater autonomy, the ability for people to make decisions on their own? If we do that, I think you're going to find it's more appealing. Let me get that. Hello, Shawn here. I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? And then if performs, so just thinking about more frequent dialogue, more frequent discussions. So I want to end with this. You know, again, my intention today coming into here wasn't to, well, I just wanted to give you something to think about. Because I think what we're talking about applies to all of us, no matter whether we're retired, whether we're in business, whether the Rotary is our focus, doesn't really matter. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know for the most part. I'm probably just reaffirming some things that you maybe hadn't thought about so much. And I think the challenge for all of us, in order to prepare for the future, to ensure the Rotary not only sustains but grows in the future, is to really think about we have to change in order to appeal to this younger generation. That is our responsibility. We have that responsibility. So I encourage or employ all of you to take that responsibility. What can you do differently to engage those of a younger generation of different views? How can you learn more about what they're looking for? And what can you do, whether it be in the Rotary or otherwise, to bring them on board, to make them or bring interest to them so they actually want to come aboard and contribute. So with that said, the hook is about to come out. I want to thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it. And again, I really do hope you enjoy Owen Sound. And if you do anything for me, please come back. We're dying for people to come back to this town, literally. Thank you. Thanks, sir.